Sure, no problem, sir. No problem.
Yeah,
Nidhi?
yes, sir, we'll start. We are also live on YouTube now.
Okay, okay, good. Go ahead.
Yeah, sir. So, a very good afternoon to our resource person for today, Professor Vivek Suneja, who will be delivering a lecture on National Education Policy 2020. But before I invite you, sir, I would like to read out a few lines about you. Professor Vivek Suneja is Dean of Faculty Management Studies, FMS, University of Delhi. As a Felix Scholar, he studied for his doctoral degree at the University of Reading in the United Kingdom. For over a decade, he taught at various premier universities in Britain, including at the University of Salford, Manchester, and at the Open University of United Kingdom. Upon his return to India, he joined FMS as professor. Professor Suneja has served as Dean Planning and as Pro Vice Chancellor of the University of Delhi. Professor Suneja has published several books and papers in the areas of strategy, marketing, entrepreneurship, economics, culture, and public policy. Among his prominent books are Markets, a multidimensional approach to the market economy, published by Routledge, UK, Policies, Policy Issues for Business, published by Sage, UK, and The Economics of Marketing, published by Edward Elgar, UK. Professor Suneja's most recent book, Economic Theory and Policy Amidst Global Discontent, has been published by Francis and Taylor, UK. Professor Suneja has done consulting and training work for several prominent international and national organizations. He is deeply committed to furthering societal well-being. We welcome you, sir. I now request you, sir, to take over the session. This is for the
Nidhi, if you
participants.
permit me, I will
Yes, sir.
speak for 2 minutes before we invite Professor Suneja. Sir, thank you very much for joining us and welcome to this special program. Let me briefly tell you that this is the faculty development program and a workshop combined together for teaching and non-teaching staff. And our purpose here is to do better integration of teaching and administrative staff. That is what we are trying to do. This is the second workshop of this kind. The first workshop, we had about 4,000 people from all over the country, and in this workshop also there are about 400 participants. And let me tell you, sir, that we are very in capacity building. We are the #1 in the country, and through about 40 online programs, we have trained 90,000 teachers and various other stakeholders. And our programs are based on EDX portal. They are self-paced, and some programs we hold online, and rest we do through this our portal, which we will maintain through cloud, for which we hire the services of Amazon Prime. Now we are also planning in near future to have our own private cloud in order to save substantial cost of these training programs. So, sir, let me briefly, since this lecture is on new education policy, and no person can be better than you, because in Delhi University we are the first one to lead that how to implement the new education policy, and you are heading that. And being I myself is the member of that, and we have done a good amount of work in order to discuss how to handle this. Of course, the basic content and every other thing you will handle, but briefly, for a minute, that in my submission to all these participants who are there with us is that they should go through it meticulously and see how this can be implemented in their own institutions. And the components of this new education policy is that the structure, which is very, very important, then curriculum, course content, pedagogy, the online techniques, and research, innovation, and the component of skill, how to integrate that in our in our teaching pedagogy. Another important aspect which I could gather is that the three four things which are very key to this policy is the communication, the creativity, the collaboration, and the critical thinking, which again is not only by our teachers but by our administrators as well as the staff, which is important for implementing these policies. So sir, once again welcome, and the forum is for you, and please share your knowledgeable thoughts with the participants, and they would also like to interact with you during the after you finish your lecture. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Professor Agarwal. Thank you to Nidhi for that kind introduction. Thank you, Professor Agarwal, for inviting me to this event. I'm so gladdened to hear you have trained 90,000 people already, and certainly that's maybe that's a Guinness Book kind of event that you should mention in the Guinness Book, because that's a huge number. And I think you take a lead in many areas. This is one of them. And I think this is what the NEP wishes to promote, that colleges should take the initiative to do things, not just, routine things and spend all the time just admitting and examining students, but adding real value. So I'm really heartened. I know you take a lot of initiatives, and this is one of them. Your vocational training courses are another. So this college is doing wonderful work. I, of course, know Professor Agarwal for many years now. You can see in the background that wonderful block, of building. And I remember when I was Dean Planning, Professor Agarwal coming and saying that, how can you help us give some money for this? And luckily we managed to get him started. After that, it has all been his efforts, tireless efforts to get, so where there's a will, there's a way. I think this college is very, very lucky to have Professor Agarwal as its principal. Of course, it's named after a very eminent personality of India, Ramanujan, the great mathematician. And while I'm going to be talking about the NEP, I will mention Ramanujan and how we can learn from his story when we talk about the 4 C's that Professor Agarwal has just talked about. Creativity, communication, collaboration. For collaboration, he had to go all the way to Cambridge. And had the Cambridge mathematicians not helped him, he would have been unknown. And of course, critical thinking. So we will talk about that. I think those 4 C's are critical. Professor Agarwal is an invaluable member of this committee. We have this 42-member committee set up by the Vice Chancellor, who's looking at NEP implementation in the University of Delhi. It's a broad-based committee made up of eminent principals like Professor Agarwal, teachers of the University of Delhi, which include teachers of colleges as well as teachers of departments. Also includes elected members of the academic council. So it's a broad-based committee. We meet every Thursday practically for almost 4 hours, from 4 to 7:38. And we've already had 12 such marathon meetings. And at the moment, we've just been looking at the academic programs. We've not been looking at other aspects, just the academic aspects of the NEP. So I will first talk about the NEP in general, what NEP, in my understanding, means, what it tries to achieve, and then maybe say something specific as to how a committee is approaching these issues. So, as you know, this is the new education policy 2020. And so the question is, you see there are 3 keywords there. New, or national. National, let's not, N can also be new, but it's actually national. So national education policy and 2020. Now, it begs the question, what exactly do we mean by education and what do we mean by policy? A policy is different from a detailed blueprint. And this is a policy document. It's a strategy document. It's a document of vision, of intent. It's not a fine print document. And I think the NEP framers have been very wise in doing so. They've basically said, let's give autonomy to various universities to make up their mind as to what exactly you wish to fill those boxes with. But we'll give you a broad framework. And I'm just checking. You can hear me all right, Nidhi and Professor Agarwal? I'm just checking. Nidhi ji, you can hear me? Professor Agarwal?
Yeah, we can hear you, sir. We can hear you.
Right,
Yeah.
all right. You see, the problem with, with online lecturing is sometimes you just don't know whether you're speaking to a blank screen and there are connection problems. So I'm glad. If there's an issue, let me know, right? And then I can pause. What I was saying is it's a policy document. It's a strategy document. It's a vision document. And we are then supposed to work out details. More importantly, what is the NEP's vision of education? What exactly education means? And I think the NEP is fairly radical in its revisioning of what education is. And I am very greatly encouraged, like many people across the political spectrum who might disagree on various things with the government on various aspects, and this is a democracy, so we have every right to do so. But I think a lot of people across the spectrum have, they might disagree on some other aspects of the NEP. There's not complete unanimity, of course. But there are certain things, at least the academic thrust of the program, which many people across the spectrum have found very promising, and so do I. And I'll tell you why. So what exactly is the NEP's vision of education? How does it define education? So what is education? What are the goals? And what are the means by which that will be achieved? Any policy, any strategy has two components. I'm a professor of strategy management, the Faculty of Management Studies, Delhi University, so I teach strategy. Strategy is the same as policy. The first thing is, what are the goals? And secondly, how will you get there? So your long-term goals and how will you get there broadly? That strategy. So what are the goals? What is meant by education? Now, some of you might be familiar with the work of Rabindranath Tagore when he set up Shanti Niketan, which now is a central university. It's called Vishwa Bharati, and it has lost some of its old luster and maybe lost some of its way as well. This is not the kind of institution which perhaps Tagore had in mind when he set it up. But if you read Rabindranath Tagore's collected works or his collection of essays, you'll find one essay which is called An Eastern University, where he talks about why he set up this school, which later became a university, which he called Shanti Niketan, later became Vishwa Bharati. And he says, why am I doing it? And he says that, look, the way the Western education is delivered in the West, but even more importantly in India, is deeply unsatisfactory. And he said education should have two aims. One is livelihood, but the other is about life itself. And education cannot be reduced merely to finding ways to earn a livelihood. That's an important aspect of education. But life is larger than livelihood. And if life is reduced to earning a livelihood, earning and spending, that's a rather poor life. So Tagore, who, as you know, was deeply steeped in Indian traditions. At the same time, he was an internationalist, never a nationalist in a narrow sense, never a prejudiced nationalist. In fact, he said, I see no conflict between a broader notion of, enlightened notion of nationhood and cooperation in the international sphere. And he said that, look, the Indian vision is very different. Because after all, the Indian vision of life is very different. Indian vision of life from the Upanishads, from Buddha, all the way to the Sufi saints, whether it's Kabir or Guru Nanak or the Islamic Sufi saints, and we have had so many of them. All of them had one unifying vision of life, which was that material things are okay. You need bread, you need butter. You might even need a little bit of jam. In modern times, you might need pizza. But even Jesus said that man does not live by bread alone. Eating and drinking is fine. Clothes are fine. But then after that, you need emotional sources of satisfaction. That you get from friendship. That you get by working together. In the university, in your offices, by playing cricket together and winning the great match that we won, team spirit. You get it through a relationship within your family, father, son, mother, daughter, or whatever relationships there are. You get it through community spirit. So you don't only look after your own children, but also the neighbor's children. And that sense of brotherhood, that sense of fraternity, which was one of the goals of the French Revolution as well. That is also an important source of satisfaction, an important source of joy. The other thing he said, and he said the Indians recognized that very early on. Remember, Buddha was not escaping poverty. He was escaping affluence. He was born the son of a king. He was a prince. And he had, he lived in a palace. He had a beautiful wife and a kid, Rahul. And yet, as the story goes, when he saw the old man and the sick man, he realized there's suffering in the world, and he said, well, let's find out why this suffering exists. So in terms of GDP per capita and so forth, the kind of things that we constantly talk about, Buddha had it all. He was a very rich man in material terms. He was richer than most people today. And yet he said, well, this is okay. This may be partially necessary, but certainly not sufficient. Man does not live by bread alone, as Jesus would have said. And the Indian quest has been therefore a wider quest. It's not just food and, which is fine. You need all that. But to limit that to a mere material mode is not the Indian vision. Right from the Upanishads, where even the Vedic hymn of creation in the Rig Veda, the glorious hymn of creation. In the end, where it says, so he asked the question, where did this all come from? The sky, this earth, the sunlight, the sun, the stars, where did this all come from? And in the end, the last line is so enigmatic. He says, maybe he knows and maybe he knows not. In other words, even maybe the God might not know. Even that may be a mystery to him. Maybe he knows and maybe he knows not. But the general point which Tagore which sang about in his poems, in his Gitanjali, which won the Nobel Prize in 1920, whatever year that was, early 20s, he was essentially saying that the human spirit is wider and grander, and the human vision. Humans are more than animals. They're not just animals. Of course, Plato and Aristotle had asked that question long ago. They said, what is the good human life? What is a good human life? And they compared to the life of pigs. Pigs. They said, suppose pigs, you give them enough food and they reproduce, and they can even have a good mud bath because pigs love mud. And we today go to beauty parlors to have mud baths. They get it for free. So, I mean, if humans get that, they get good food and they get mud baths and beauty parlors and they reproduce. Is that good enough for humans? That's good enough for pigs. Is that good enough for humans? And the Indian answer, right from the Vedas and Upanishads, through the ages, through the epics, through the Sufi saints, was an emphatic no. So Tagore was steeped in that tradition. And yet, Tagore also was steeped in the Western tradition. So he could recite Wordsworth, he could recite Shakespeare by heart, he'd read Tennyson and Shelley, he'd read the mathematical works of Bertrand Russell. Later on, of course, we know he rubbed shoulders with Einstein, and there are these famous conversations of Tagore and Einstein, which are a classic, which I recommend all of you to read. But Tagore said, let's marry the East and the West. There is no university in India which does that at that point. The Indian education system, as you know, was set up by Lord Macaulay. And at that point, all the English wanted was to train people in clerical tasks. After all, the British would come in as civil servants, and they set up the civil service here. And in some garb, the same thing follows, except that the brown sahibs have replaced the white sahibs. But they couldn't get all the clerks. You couldn't import all the clerks. So they said, okay, let's train a sufficient number of Indians in the English language so they can do the lower menial tasks, administrative tasks. That was the Macaulay policy. And Tagore obviously was deeply dissatisfied with that. He said, look, we are an ancient civilization. We will learn English so that we can read Tennyson and Wordsworth and Thoreau and Veblen, but we will not give up our own culture. Much like Gandhi used to say. Gandhi used to say that I am more than happy to leave my windows open so that all the winds of the world can come and blow into my room and freshen the room. But I'm not willing to let my door open. So much in the same way. Our roots are Indian. They're wider than material phenomenon. There's a quest for the spirit. There's an emotional aspect to life. And more than that, there's an aesthetic aspect of life. Above all, Tagore was a poet. Of course, he's a very talented person. You know, there's Ravindra Sangeet. He wrote so many songs. He did so much painting. He wrote so many short stories, novels, plays. In fact, if you look at his collected works, I've just got, I ordered from Sahitya Academy. I can even actually show it to you. I'll show you one volume of his works. And this is just one volume of Tagore's work, okay, one. There are three such, and these are just the English writings of Tagore, which were translated to English, which are the minority of what Tagore wrote. So the man was absolutely colossal in his output, essays and stories and so on. He was a poet. I don't know how many of you people know that when he wrote the Gitanjali was written in complete seclusion. He did not meet a soul. For a couple of years, he lived in a boathouse on the river Ganges. Didn't meet anybody at all. And he saw the sunshine, the sunrise of the Ganges, the sunset of the Ganges. He saw the birds coming in and out. I don't know whether any of you read. He also is supposed to have had a spiritual experience, which he describes in one of his essays. And I won't go into right now, but very briefly, there was an experience which he calls his second birth. One day, when he was walking in the forest, when sunlight comes in through the trees, through the leaves, there's a dappling effect. And often, I don't know whether you've done a walk in the forest. I've done plenty. I'm a great nature lover. And when the light streams in and it dapples, it's gorgeous. But this time for Tagore, he had an experience like all the great mystics described, like Vivekananda described, or Ramakrishna, or for that matter, Krishnamurti and Ramana Maharishi. He felt that he had become one with the trees, with the sun, and not just metaphorically. He actually, almost concretely. And he was overtaken by bliss. And he felt he was one with everything. And tears streamed down his eyes, and that lasted for 3 or 4 days. He was in a state of complete intoxication. And he says, I was never the same. The veil had been lifted. The veil of illusion had been lifted. I was one with all of creation. And that's what he describes in one of his essays. I'm paraphrasing. And he was never the same. So he said that when I formed Shantiniketan, this is what we should do. We should teach everything the West has to offer. It's science, it's mathematics, it's physics, it's chemistry. All that we must teach so that we can be as good as the Western man when it comes to technology in terms of livelihoods. But when it comes to life, sure, we read Western philosophy, we read Schopenhauer, and we read, Russell and all the great classics, Greek and Roman and the later ones. But we also read the Upanishads in Sanskrit. We also read the Vedas and our own works, so that in cultural terms, we are the best of the East and the West. We are not isolated. And we do painting and we do music and we do arts and we do dance. And he said, being a nature lover, he said that we should base our universities and our schools in places of natural beauty. And that's what he did with Shantiniketan. He said, if man is cut off from nature, we make concrete jungles. And today we are paying the price with global warming and destruction of flora and fauna and destruction of species. The species of animals and of plants is now disappearing at a rate which has never ever happened before in human history. Just because unrelenting pressure of urbanization. Those of you who've been to Shimla, we've just, in the last 3 or 4 years, we've doubled the road size on the way to Shimla. Now that's good for getting to Shimla. But the point is, why are you going to Shimla anyway? If you're going to destroy the mountain and the trees, then you might as well live in Delhi. So he was a great nature lover. And by the way, those of you ever traveled from here to say, Chandigarh all the way from this, you pass through Sonipat and Panipat and on that road. Again, my heart bleeds. I've done that journey for many years because my Chacha, my uncle, lives in Ludhiana. And for so many years, there were these wonderful neem trees in the middle. Wonderful, I don't know, 50 years old probably, or more. And in one single day, practically, they cut them all. Why? It was already, I think, 3 lanes each. Now they made it 4 lanes. Tagore would have been aghast. So he said, place your university in a place of natural beauty. Because if you otherwise cut off from nature, you can never be in peace. You will never be in harmony. We must rise with the birds and set with the birds. In fact, in one of his poems, he asked this question: why is it that birds sing every morning and every dusk? He says, it's the same sun, it's the same day. So why do they get up with a song in the heart? Yeah. And again, if you notice, birds in the evening, they sing a song before they retire to the nest. And he said, humans, they neither get up with a song in the heart, and they neither sleep with a song in the heart. They don't sing at sunrise and sunset anymore. And he said, this is because we've cut off from nature. If we were below the trees, we would also, just as they do still in many villages in India, rise with the sun and sing worship to the soul or to the spirit of the Brahman, which animates the entire universe. And we would give thanks for the food we get during the day and sing a song before we retire for the night. So he was very keen on placing it in nature. So that was Shantiniketan. And by the way, the NEP is full of references to Shantiniketan. If you read the NEP document, and I think it's a very good document when it comes to academic visioning. There are parts which I disagree with, but as far as this goes, it's an excellent document and many, many references to Tagore, Shantiniketan. Then, of course, references which are even more ancient. Remember, India is the home of universities. The earliest universities in the world, Oxford and Cambridge, are very, very recent. Yeah, the earliest universities in the world are Taxila, in the West and Nalanda in the East. And huge universities, huge. If you see the Nalanda site, the excavations, and only partial excavation have been done. It's an absolutely staggering size of university. Certainly bigger than the University of Delhi at its center. With the colleges, of course, DU is very big. But if you look at the central part, Nalanda is probably bigger. It had hostels, it had all branches of study. It had astronomy, it had, of course, Buddhist studies later on, but it had sciences, it had mathematics. Great center of learning. So was Taxila. So India has been, education is not new to India. In some sense, we invented the university. And again, the NEP has many references to Nalanda and Taxila. Okay, so that's some of the historical background. So what does the NEP say about education today? What is its vision? So what it says, I think, is something any reasonable person would say. You would say if we started from a clean slate. That is, education not just about livelihood, it's also about life. But okay, go on from there. So it would say, as Tagore would say, exercise the faculties that you have. And what are the faculties that we have? We have a body, we have a mind, and we have a heart. That's it. We have three faculties. The soul could be called an extension of the heart. The mind, so we can think. Unlike animals can also think, but we have a bigger brain. So we can do mathematics, which not many animals can. They can do elementary counting, monkeys, but they can't do calculus. So mind, use the mind. We have a body, often not as powerful as the other animals, but nevertheless, a very supple body. Exercise it, right? Run, do sports, play cricket, play football, do gyms, exercise your body, exercise your mind. And finally, we have the heart. We have the capacity for affection, for love, for emotions. Exercise it. Exercise compassion. The Dalai Lama often says, if you wish others to be happy, practice compassion. If you wish yourself to be happy, practice compassion. Because unlike in economics or management, which is my discipline, which mistakenly often says that joy comes from acquisition and consumption. If you really think about it, and this is what the Upanishad said, this is what the Bible says, this is what the Quran says, this is what the Sufis said. Joy comes from giving, from sharing. If you remember any of your school picnics, I still remember my school picnics, the most joyous occasions. And why? Well, we just went off to some place. It could be Batkal Lake or wherever in Delhi. But then we shared our tiffins, and that's sharing, and we played together. If you go on a picnic alone, you could take the others, you can even thieve others' picnics, other tiffins, and go alone. There'd be no joy. I remember once, I used to live in England, I lived there for a very long while. And once, I often used to go with my family to see sights, but on one occasion I went to see Edinburgh in Scotland, and I was alone. And I went to Edinburgh Castle and all the sights, and it was no fun. Next time, my wife was there, my father would come visiting, was also there, and I went to the same sites, and it was such a joy because I was telling them, look, this is the castle, and we were joking and sharing, right? So mind, body, and heart. So let's exercise the mind. Let's exercise the body. And let's exercise the heart. That would be education. Training in how best to use your mind, how to skillfully use your body, and how to skillfully share mind, body, heart. Right? That's education. And what a teacher is supposed to do? They're supposed to facilitate that. I think the word teacher is not a good word. The Indian word, of course, was guru. Guru is someone who shows the light or enlightens. And you can only spark it. A lamp can only I mean, lamp can only be ignited by someone. It has to shine by its own light. So you can only ignite minds, as Kalam used to say. You can only ignite minds. You can't shine a torch on them. I mean, that they can only bask in your light for a while. So you have to get people to be learners, and you have to facilitate learning. Teaching is a bit of a arrogant and outdated concept. We should outgrow. We help people learn, and in the process, learn ourselves. In the process, we grow ourselves. So, mind, body, and heart. So then, what the NEP says? Okay, it says there are 4 specific aims of the academic programs, and I'm not talking about higher education. NEP also, the first part is all about school education, yes, and very interesting things there. But I'm not talking about that. I'm only restricting myself to higher education, university education. And he says, please restructure your programs, achieve 4 things. And what are the 4 things? First, it says holistic. Make education holistic, which is what I've been talking about. Integrate mind, body, heart. Second, it says multidisciplinarity. It says today, all the interesting things, all the research, all new ideas come at intersection of disciplines. I mean, if you look at Nobel Prizes, in economics, people who win Nobel Prizes are people who are actually psychologists. They've been winning Nobel Prizes. If you look at life sciences, people who are chemists, because chemistry, botany, zoology, you have biochemistry, genetics. If you want to do genetics, you have to know mathematics without computation skills, because the genes combine and recombine. All of life, all its forms. Whether it's the coronavirus or the human being, the base is just 4 proteins, right? Cytosine, adenine, thymine, and guanine. That's what makes up DNA or RNA. Of course, in RNA, as you know, uracil replaces, I think, it's cytosine. So it's 4. It's a code of 4. Computers on a code of 2, 0 and 1. All life works on a code of 4. And that, when the 4 changes, you get a lizard, you change that, and you get a mustard plant, and you change that, you get a man, and you change that, you get a monkey or a dinosaur. So to look at those, when people started doing the Human Genome Project and so on, the first thing they realized they needed mathematics. Because without combinatorial techniques, without IT software, which can deal with these combinations, because even with 4 genes, you get trillions of combinations. By the way, humans have roughly 20,000 genes. These are the 4 bases, of course. These are bases of genes. Humans have 20,000 genes. I don't know whether you know that. There's an amoeba which has 40,000 genes. In fact, there's an amoeba, the first life form, which has 400,000 genes. Humans have only 20,000 genes. And you can well ask, what are those 400,000 genes for? So what humans have done is not we've acquired more genes. We switched off genes. We've specialized. All the building blocks were already there in the first, So there's now a very, very counterintuitive theory of evolution, which says that evolution was not adding to genetic material. It was just switching off genes so that you became better at few things. You specialized. You began, if you like, in a multidisciplinary route, from a holistic base, and then you specialized. You started from being a jack of all, which is an amoeba, with all these huge number of genes, and then you started specializing along evolutionary paths. So you went the path of reptile, you went down the path of mammals, and complex life forms don't come necessarily by adding to genes, but often by restricting gene expression. But the general point I was making, and I say all these things because, as you can see, things are holistic, things are multidisciplinary. So you need mathematics. So the first thing, holistic. 4 key points. 1, holistic. Number 2, multidisciplinary. Number 3, it says skills. It says that skills could be at various levels. You can have IT skills, you can have soft skills, which is communication was being talked about by Professor Agarwal. Communication, by the way, can happen in a language, English, Hindi, or in science, communication happens through mathematics. In general, there are only two languages in the world, two ways to communicate. One is so-called linguistic language, and there's so many languages, whether it's French or Taiwanese or what have you. And the other language is mathematics, logic. And you need both. Whether it's a social science or science, you need proficiency in both languages. Yeah? And that's something I'll later talk about how we're addressing that in our committee. So skills. So skills can be at various levels. It can be skills in communication, both mathematical and linguistic. It can be skills where you learn to, do software programming, skills in terms of doing cartoon animation. It can be pottery skills, painting skills, all kinds of skills you can have. And I think, and I'll come back to this later, but the new education policy talks about the challenge of artificial intelligence, AI, and how that will change the kind of skills that are required. And that's a huge paradigm shift that is happening before the eyes. And I will talk about AI's challenge a little later. So first, holistics, second, multidisciplinarity, third, skills, and the fourth, research. So there are 4 planks. If you read the NAP in terms of its academic intent, what it wishes to achieve, we come to means in a moment. Make education holistic, mind, body, heart. Play sports, do debating, holistic. Do music, go out to nature, do some gardening. Let not only the Malis of the University of Delhi do the gardening and win flower prizes in the flower show, which is going to come up in a month's time. And it's a great tradition. Get the students to garden. Get the students to grow something. And then they'll ask, okay, where are the birds? And where do they nest? And how many eggs do they lay? Then environment will matter to you. Sustainability will matter to you. At the moment, all the college festivals are so full of energy. Look at the energy our students have in the college festivals, whether it's music or dance or debate or drama or what have you. We've decided in our committee that we are starting a new course, which is called co-curricular. We'll give it credits. And that will be all this. It could be sport, it could be music. You pick what you have. Most colleges have societies where there's a photography club or this and that, debating club, dramatics club. We will involve them, and every student must pick up one such activity, co-curricular activity, and we'll give him or her credits for that. It could be sports, it could be anything. Yes, and it is not so much for his level achieved as for the effort put in, for his ability or her ability to express his or her soul through that activity. So that's one. Multidisciplinarity, I'm going to talk to you in a moment about how we incorporate that. Skills, and finally research. So the NEP says that we must, in order to promote creativity, students must apply the theory that they've learned to some problem. It could be a local problem, it could be a global problem, it could be a project. Do some research. If you look at the research word itself, it's made of 2 words: research. Research, search and search again. In other words, knowledge is not a given. It's not something ready, packaged and sold. Learning is a process of discovery, it's a process of search. And we must do our own discoveries. It's not that the teacher just comes and tells us, okay, somebody did this search and here's the product. That way we never own that piece of knowledge. We apply our own brains. We research. I often think that in terms of pedagogy, and I'll talk to you about that in a moment, We are really, really pathetic in most universities in the world. By the way, I don't know whether it strikes you that if you want to do a school teaching anywhere in the world, you need a B.Ed degree. You do your bachelor's or master's, that's not good enough. A compulsory requirement is a B.Ed. And in a B.Ed, they teach you about pedagogy, how you teach, what works. Does group, do PowerPoints work? How do you do participant learning? How many people should be in a group in order to promote activity? How do you do collaboration, pedagogy? But if you want to teach at the university, there is no such thing. There's no B.Ed. There might be a small little course, initial orientation course. That's it. Otherwise, you do your master's or PhD, or you clear your net, you pick up a piece of chalk, or these days, you pen on the whiteboard, or you have a PowerPoint slide. And that's it, which is a very strange situation. It's true everywhere in the world, not just in India. At Harvard, at Stanford, at Cambridge, exactly the same. So there's a need to think as to how to get students to think for themselves. What kind of pedagogy should you use? For example, I'll give you a very simple example. You want to, in physics, I think all of you would remember from class 10, it's so basic. The 3 laws of motion of Newton. So if you remember the first law, it's a very simple law. The first law says everything remains in a state of rest or motion, which is constant speed and direction, unless acted upon by another force. So you need a force to get a body to change its velocity, speed and direction. That's the first law. The second law says the change in velocity, the change in speed that you achieve, right, is directly proportional to the force and inversely proportional to the mass of the body. In other words, if there's a heavy piece of stuff lying there and you want to move it, it's change its velocity, you'll have to exert greater force than if the mass was lighter, it had lesser mass. And the change achieved is proportional to the force exerted. Second law. Third law, the only 3 laws of Newton, and all of mechanics, by the way, rests on these 3 laws. Newton discovered them around 1600. All, apart from Einsteinian theory, relativity, and apart from quantum theory, all of mechanics has its base in what Newton discovered in his mechanics or his invention of calculus. So the third law is that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So if you exert a force in any body, it exerts an equal opposite force on the body that exerted the force. So all forces exist in pairs. There's no unilateral force in the world. And the net force in the world is 0 because every action is countered by an equal opposite reaction. And thank God for that. Otherwise, if you move the table, you'll move the whole universe. Yes, because if forces existed unilaterally, I could just by pushing a table shift the whole universe, but forces fortunately don't. They act in pairs and they neutralize each other. So a system as a whole, the table might move, but the system as a whole remains where it is because forces have been equalized in the opposite direction. Now, this is how we taught how have we taught this? I remember being taught this, somebody walking up to the blackboard and saying, okay, here's the first law, here's the second law, here's the third law. And if you are lucky, and if the lab worked, and if the lab equipment was in order, they take you to the lab to demonstrate those 3 laws. So they'd show you, I remember the third law of being explained with the spring balances. You take 2 spring balances, put them together, pull one, and the other spring balance should show in equal or opposite. The extension of the spring should be constant in both spring balances when you pull one. That's the third law. The first law, of course, you could roll a ball. It would stop after a while. If you grease the table, if you put oil on it, it would so the friction is reduced. The ball would keep rolling. And so you could, by extension, say that's the first law. And the second law is fairly. Now, is that the way it ought to be taught? Absolutely not. It should be taught the way Newton actually discovered the laws. We should discover the laws for ourselves. If Newton could discover it, why can't we do it ourselves? So you should be asking a student or your students, okay, look at the world. Look at how things move or don't move. Can you see any empirical patterns? And if you can you state them? And if you state them, Those are the laws. So anybody, by looking at the world, by saying that, okay, nothing moves unless acted by another force. If you grease a table to reduce friction, the thing keeps moving. Or if you spin a top, and if there is no friction, it moves greater than if there is friction. You could derive the three laws fairly simply. Even the law of gravity, you know, the famous example where Newton used to teach at University of London, and the story goes, whether it's true or not, he went to Cambridge in summer for a holiday and he saw an apple fall. Then he asked the question, why has the apple fallen? And the moment he had asked the question, then he said, oh, my first law says nothing moves unless acted upon by another force. So apple, why is it falling? No force is acting on it. Why is it coming down? And why is it not going up? Why is it not going sideways? So he says, okay, that means something must be pulling the apple. And what is pulling the apple? What is below an apple? Why everything falls? If you jump, why do you come down? And he says, the earth must be pulling the apple. And then he asks, but why does the earth pull the apple? And here's the genius. He says, that was an hypothesis, okay? That's a pure conjecture. He says the earth has mass, apple has mass, maybe two masses attract each other. But if you make that hypothesis, you have to make the opposite hypothesis. The apple is attracting the earth. And indeed, that is the case. So, you know, when we jump, right? It's not that the earth also pulls us, we also pull the earth. In fact, every time you jump, the earth slightly moves to meet you. You move the earth when you jump. Because remember, if you remember the third law, the force exerted by the apple on earth and earth on apple is exactly the same. But the apple moves a lot and the earth moves a little. Why? Because the change in velocity, the acceleration is inversely proportional to mass, which is the second law. So earth is very, very heavy. So although the force exerted is equal, it moves very slightly. And the apple, being a very light body, moves a lot. But if these bodies were equal, they've been equal movement. You know, why do tides come in, the high tide and the low tide? Because the moon with its gravity pulls the water up. You know, when it's facing the ocean, you get a high tide. And when it's away, you get a low tide. And it's hidden. Now, after Newton had made these laws, you know, especially law of gravity, he had to test it. And for that, he found evidence from the laws of, from the observation of Kepler, who kept detailed records on planetary motion. And then Einstein showed how his, law of gravity would explain the elliptical pattern that Kepler had discovered for planetary motion. So the general point I'm making is here that we should make people Galileos and we should make people Newtons and so forth. We should not be instructing them. We should get them to be creative, to think for themselves. Research means search again, discover again. Not just say something and then take them to the lab and say, okay, now can you verify it? No. Do it the way Newton did it. Newton wasn't taught any laws. There was no Newton telling Newton to do these laws. He discovered it. Like the Archimedes did, you know, when he gets into the water, he's trying to find the principle of flotation. I hope you remember that. I'm also, by the way, not a science student. I only studied science in class 12. But remember how Archimedes discovered the principle of flotation. He was trying to do it, couldn't get the wind of it. And then he enters a bathtub, as the story goes, and a certain amount of water comes out. And he says, Eureka. And the law is that, you know, things float as long as the weight of the liquid displaced is equal to the weight of the body that's immersed in the liquid. So general point I'm making simply is this: get people to be creative, to do research. Okay. Now let's look at each of them. I've already talked about the holistic part. I partly talked about research. Maybe I should say something about multidisciplinarity, what it means, why it's important, what are the dangers, and after all, you should be jack of all, but you should also be master of one. You should not remain jack of all. So multidisciplinarity doesn't mean that you lose specialization in a particular topic, but it does mean that you learn complementary knowledge and skills. So, multidisciplinarity. What do we do? Well, we can teach the major subject that we have, and we can combine it with a range, a bouquet of options, which we can call minors. So we don't sacrifice on our majors. But since now this is a 4-year program, just then a 3-year program, we have room, right? Without sacrificing what we've been doing, without diluting it, without taking away its character, we let that remain. But given an additional year that we have now, we can complement that major with a bouquet of minors which students can pick up and which they'll find useful. And multidisciplinarity is, of course, different from interdisciplinarity. And the real challenge, which is going to be a huge challenge at DU and practically anywhere in the world for that matter, is not just multidisciplinarity, but interdisciplinarity. Multi means you read several subjects and you're assessed by people in those various subjects. Inter is different. Interdisciplinarity means that suppose you've studied economics and sociology. Then you write a dissertation, which is both in economics and in sociology. Now, obviously, then it has to be assessed by faculty who are steeped in both disciplines. Maybe they can form a board. Maybe on the board you have an economist and a sociologist. I must say that at Delhi University we have this institution called Delhi School of Economics, which is fairly famous. It was set up by Professor V.K.R.V. Rao, who was a very renowned economist. Also, he was the Vice Chancellor of the University of Delhi for a while. And he set up the Delhi School of Economics. But Delhi School of Economics is not just economics. It has several departments. When he set it up, it had a department of economics, it had a department of sociology, it had a department of management studies, and a department of geography. Later, management studies, where I am, hived off separately, became faculty management studies, and a commerce department was added to the Delhi School of Economics as a department. Now, the idea behind, and they're situated next to each other. The buildings are right next to each other. Sociology, geography, commerce, and management departments are located right next to each other. And the idea of V.K.R.V. Rao was this would promote this geographical clustering and this institutional clustering. Although different departments, but Delhi School of Economics has a single director, which rotates between these various departments. So rotates between economics and sociology and geography and so on. And he said this institutional clustering as well as this geographical proximity would enable people to do each other's courses, talk to each other, learn from each other. So he was very clear that if you wanted to study economics in India, unless you understood the caste system, you could not understand the economy of India. Unless you understood the geography of India, after all, the economics of hills is different from economics of coastal villages. So just a course on microeconomics, which pays no attention to context, is a poor course. You need microeconomics, but you need it to be complemented by the geography of India and its knowledge thereof, and so forth. Management, of course, is very closely linked to economics and then sociology and all these things, geography, they form an integrated whole. In fact, the very reason universities exist, and this is what the NEP is very keen on, it says all institutions, whether they are the IIMs or the IITs, must become multidisciplinary institutions. The kind of thing V.K.R.V. Rao was talking about. They should not remain isolated areas, they must share. And the idea is this because, look at the word university comes from the word universe. Similarly, Vishwadhyaya comes from the word Vishwa. So what is a university? We study the universe. And as they say, the whole is more than the sum of its parts. So it's not just multi, it's also inter. Take Take English literature. Supposing you're doing English and you're reading a novel, right? So Delhi University English is a fairly popular option, and many Delhi University colleges are reputed for the quality of their programs, and so is the department. So suppose in English, or could be in Hindi, Urdu, whatever. Suppose you read a novel, right? The novel could be by anyone, Somerset Maugham or Charles Dickens or whoever. What exactly is a novel? A novel is partially psychology, is partially philosophy, partially history, partially culture, partially geography, because geography determines culture and history and so forth. All that makes up for a novel. So if you read a novel and along with it, you read a course in psychology or in philosophy, alternatively, you read an English novel and you compare and contrast that with an Urdu novel of the same period or a different period, you're greatly enriched. So a university, unlike narrow institutes, which specialize, whether institutes of management, they specialize in management. The Indian Institute of Technology specializes in technology, but a university like Delhi University is more than the sum of its parts. Interestingly, in the US, for example, or in the UK, you have very few institutes, educational institutes. You don't have standalone things. So in Harvard, the medical school is part of Harvard University. The engineering faculty is a part of Harvard University. You don't have IITs and stuff. I mean, there are some institutions, some of them. But by and large, all of them are within the university, right? So the idea is that you can, if you're doing technology, technology is based on science, and science is therefore based on physics and chemistry, your basic sciences. They feed into technology and vice versa. It's a mutually symbiotic relationship. And therefore, when you hive off these things into separate institutes, whether it's Institute of Management or Technology or Institute of Science, you're doing disservice. And that is why both in Oxford and Cambridge, traditional British universities, traditional European universities, US, all these things are not set alone, they're housed together. And it's symbiotic. Now, that's a challenge for many Indian universities, also a challenge for Delhi University, because often we are set up as departments, and departments rarely talk to each other. Unfortunately, even at the Delhi School of Economics, at the moment, there's very little conversation that takes place between various disciplines, but that's not restricted to Delhi School of Economics. That's all over the place. In India generally, and DU would be no real exception. So multidisciplinarity, interdisciplinarity is something that our committee is working on, how we promote that. I've already talked to you about skills and research. Maybe a couple of other things I should talk about, and then maybe we can take some questions. One is the assessment and evaluation system, exams. In English, there is an expression which is one of my favorite expressions. Let not the tail wag the dog. The dog should wag the tail. The tail should not wag the dog. Yeah? I don't know if you've seen dogs who are, who are very happy or very angry. And I'm a great animal lover. When they wag their tails, they get so involved in a situation, that tail takes over. That tail takes over. Even in cricket, they use that expression. That when the tail does very well, your last few batsmen, the bowlers do good batting, they say the tail wagged. Let not the tail wag the dog. So, problem is, if you do not pay attention to examination systems, students ultimately will only look at exam results, not what you want to teach, whether it's multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary or holistic. They want to get marks. Why? On the basis of their marks, they get, admission to masters or PhDs or jobs and so on. And if an examination system is based on assessing things based on memory, it's based on rote learning and assessment, You can do everything in the world, but ultimately, the only thing that you'll end up assessing is what the exam system is assessing. That's the only incentive that you've given it. I often think in India, the examination system has done us great damage. I think our students today, they essentially think about 3 exams. Nothing else matters, frankly. All this pedagogy, nothing matters. 3 exams. First, nursery school. Get into a good, good school. It's not easy because often, so-called public English-speaking schools are scarce in numbers, given the population. So, there's a huge kind of exercise to get your kid into one of these schools. So get people school entry exam, 1, crack that. And often that's more of a challenge for the parent rather than for the student. Number 2, at the end of class 12, crack one other exam. It could be the medical, it could be the IT, engineering, it could be CLAT for law, it could be for Delhi University or other universities, it could be board exams. Now I'm told you might have, common entrance exam for universities as well. So you'll have to crack that. So crack that. Exam number 2. Number 3, crack one subsequent exam. Often a lot of engineering students end up doing MBAs, or people do chartered accountancy, or people go into civil services, whether it's the IAS or state service, to crack one more exam. And if you crack those 3 exams, nothing else matters. And for all of them, they're coaching centers. There are coaching centers for entry at the MBBS or Bachelor of Engineering. There's Akash, and all kinds of institutes do roaring business. Then for your, to get into IIMs or FMS, your MBA exam, or for civil service, you have other coaching centers, Rao's and God knows what other. So you practice, you learn, you get the tricks of the trade, you crack that exam. And once you're into the system, nobody cares. Engineering ho jayega, management ho jayega. And that is a very perverse system. Very strange. In India, we worship education as Saraswati. Although, frankly, I think only Lakshmi is worshipped in this country. There's only one goddess who nobody forgets to, कोई भूलता नहीं है उनको. राम ठीक है, दिए जला दीजिए दिवाली पे, वो ठीक है. But असली बात तो लक्ष्मी पूजा है बाबा. And nobody forgets that. Saraswati puja is not a big deal. So this education for the sake of education. If you look at, by the way, if you look at the image of Saraswati, how Indians imagine Saraswati, she sits on a swan, hunts, because in Indian mythology, a swan is supposed to have the ability to separate milk from water. That's the mythology. A swan, they say, can separate milk from water, which means it can discern. It is discernment, as the scale of analysis, which is what knowledge is, to be able to distinguish one from the other. Discernment. My own name, Vivek, is supposed to mean that. तो एक दिखता है वो असल में विव है, तो उसको अलग अलग कर सकते हैं. But the next is जो विव था उसको एक भी कर सकते हैं आप, मतलब analysis plus synthesis. And if you can analyze, break up a whole into its parts, study them, and then bring them together in maybe new and creative ways, which is synthesis. Analysis plus synthesis, which Hegel would talk about in dialectics. Thesis, antithesis make synthesis. That's Vivek. That's wisdom. Not that I have any, but that's how the name goes. Viv or ek. Viv means several, ek means one. So Saraswati sits on a swan. On one hand, she has a veena, music. They go out very pleased. In Shanti Niketan, there's music. On the other hand, there's an open book, not a closed book. So when we talk about open book exams, I'm often reminded of that. And she has beads in other hand, which is ability to meditate, to introspect, to look into things deeply. Worldwide, people have used beads to help us in meditation, to think about something at a deeper level. In fact, even sometimes not to think, just be conscious at a deeper level. I don't know whether the very first shlok of Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, Patanjali ke jo Yoga Sutra hai, which is like a champion guide of yoga. The very first sutra says yoga chit vritti nirodh. Yoga, which is union with what? Your true nature. Union with your true nature, not your superficial mind and superficial thinking. Union with the true nature. How is it achieved? Chit vritti nirodh. Chit is consciousness, vritti is change, nirodh is cessation. So when you stop this, when you cease the modifications of your consciousness, then you reside in consciousness itself, right? You reside at the root. जिसको बोलते हैं सच्चित आनंद, pure consciousness, which is also bliss, anand. So meditation, is beyond learning. Meditation is to get in touch with your real self at the level of intelligence, consciousness, not knowledge, but intelligence. Intelligence is different from knowledge. So something that we've forgotten. Lastly, before I open up, I could go forever, but I think maybe we can stop and then take some questions. Look, what is artificial intelligence and how are we going to grapple with this? Professor Agarwal talked about 4 C's. One was collaboration, one was communication. But then he also talked about creativity and critical thinking. Now, critical thinking and creativity are very closely allied. Creativity, of course, is a broader term than critical thinking, because sometimes creativity does not come from thinking, it comes from cessation of thinking. There's this famous book called Lateral Thinking. It says if you keep constantly thinking is linear, A leads to B, B leads to C. But suppose you want to change that, you want to start a new thread. You have to make a break from the past. It's a quantum jump. Then you must cease thinking for a while. Yes, you must cease thinking for a while. Then maybe a fresh idea can come. Because if you're constantly thinking, you'll go along the momentum of the whole trajectory of thought. So creativity is a broader term than critical thinking. Now, what exactly is intelligence? And therefore, how do we promote it? Because intelligence is different from artificial intelligence. And I'm going to try and explain to you what the difference is and why the NEP and what we should be doing at DU is promote intelligence, not make people robots, not make them artificial intelligence. Because when it comes to being robots, being mechanical, the machines will beat us any day. First, to give you an idea of the threat of artificial intelligence. I mean, it's such a massive threat at the moment that we are not even aware what's going on. So what artificial intelligence they're doing, they're just coding machines. So the latest, they made a game. Now, this company has been recently acquired by Google, which is a British company, which made a software, an AI software, where you can get this software to play chess. And earlier, I mean, remember IBM had created this piece of software called Deep Blue. And I think they had a match with Kasparov, if I'm not mistaken. This many years ago. And Deep Blue, IBM, Deep Blue had beaten Kasparov, who was at that point the world's reigning chess champion. But when they trained that Deep Blue, the IBM, they had programmed everything that all the old chess masters, all the games that had been played, that was put into IBM, Deep Blue. And when Kasparov played, what this computer did, it looked at all that, it compared it to all the chess masters, all strategies, it made a calculation, and it played, and it bet Kasparov. But you had to feed all that the great masters had done earlier. But what this new AI does, you don't feed it anything. You just tell it, and it even can learn itself, but you even tell it, look, these are the rules of the game. The camel can move in a linear fashion, a cross-linear fashion. The horse can do this 2.5 steps. You just tell it what the movement of the game is, how many, just the rules. That's it, nothing more. Even that actually can learn by looking at people playing. But just to simplify things, you teach it the rules of the game, and that's it. What it does, it plays against itself. It breaks it up into 2 units, plays against itself. And it does it so quickly. So many games are played per millisecond that in about 4 hours, it has taught itself so well chess that within 4 hours, it has become unbeatable. No reigning chess champion can beat it. It has taught itself in 4 hours. That's the power of artificial intelligence. Today in America, they are thinking that soon doctors, apart from surgeons, all doctors will become redundant in about 5 years. You won't need it. You'll only have artificial intelligence. Why? Take a very simple example. They're already getting redundant. The case of anesthesia. What does an anesthesiologist do? He administers anesthesia to you. So he says, okay, you want to have an operation tomorrow, cardiac bypass, you're diabetic, you are this age. So he says, okay, this is the drug that should be given to you for sedation. And he monitors you while the surgery is going on. And if there are complications or depending on your heartbeat and other of your parameters, he changes the dosage. That's all he does. Now, all that is in the memory of the doctor. After all, that's what they do in MD, in medicine. They teach you that this is the research that has been done. These are the results. So they fed it into a computer, the latest. And the computer just asks a question, okay, what patient have you got? All right, diabetes. What age? This age. And he says, okay, this is the drug, you give it. And then while the surgery is going on, you keep making those inputs, you monitor, and the AI machine keeps saying, okay, do this and that. And the actual part, any nurse can do. You don't need a specialized anesthesia guy being paid, tens of thousands of dollars. Any nurse can do that, putting on the mask and giving the gas and the intravenous injection. That's fairly simple. So out, anesthesia job. They've already said that, when they compared, they found this AI machine, which they made is better than any anesthesiologist in the US, because it has infallible memory and you can keep upgrading it with the latest research findings. So anesthesia out. Radiology. So they're training people, they've trained AI machines to look at x-rays, because image scanning is now so good. If you go to Google reverse engine, by the way, even you can do that. You take your own photograph and then you paste it on the Google reverse image engine, and it'll match your face. And wherever you've appeared on the web, if I sometimes forget where I've been, all I do is put on my, do a self photograph on my iPad, put into the Google, and it shows me wherever I've been photographed last 6 months. It says this is where you've been. It is so good. Now with X-rays, they've trained it. Okay, this looks cancer, this looks benign, and again, it's doing better than radiologists. They're doing it in pathology. You look at slides. What does a pathologist do? Looks at slide and says this is benign, this is cancerous. Again, AI. They're doing it in financial markets to pick stocks. Soon, they'll be into teaching. They're already there. So, but is AI? What's the difference between artificial intelligence and intelligence? Can a machine ever be intelligent, or are these machines completely dumb? They're very good, but they are not intelligent. In fact, that's a misnomer. There is no intelligence. And if you think about it, they're totally dumb. There is no intelligence. After all, they're just coded and they're faster. Of course, they can do things better than we can most of the time because they're so much faster. Just as a Casio calculator. If you want to multiply 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 by 2, 4, 9, 8, 1, I will take some time. You put it into the calculator and it'll do it in a jiffy. Or it'll divide it in a jiffy. Does it make it intelligent? No, it's completely dumb. But it can do it faster. So the AI will take all these jobs away from us. So what will remain? It's not intelligent, it's coded. The only things that will remain is which jobs cannot be easily coded. So a lot of management jobs, a lot of education stuff, where judgment is required. In medicine, all the research that is required. Once the research has been done, you can feed it in, but the research itself, right? Thinking of new ways to beat the corona. Once it's done, you can feed it in. But so intelligence, if you think about it, is when we don't rely on memory alone. Artificial intelligence is memory. The memory is not in neural circuits, not in our neurons. It's in the software pieces, the big zeros and ones that are coded in, but it's memory. Intelligence is the ability to see patterns which we have not seen before, right? When calculus was discovered by Newton, nobody had done calculus till then. He was discovering a new pattern, creating a new pattern, understanding a new pattern. That was intelligence. When he saw the apple fall and wondered why, what's happening, and then postulated that two masses can attract each other and it's inversely proportional square of the distance. That was the hypothesis. That was intelligence. And computers can never do that. Why can they never do that? Never. Never means never. Why? If you look at the Wikipedia page on intelligence, do that. All of Wikipedia is a product after all of intelligence. If you look at the Wikipedia page on intelligence, it has basically half a page and it says we have no clue what it is. Because intelligence, remember, is the ability to see patterns which you have not seen before. So it's a non-mechanical thing. It's non-memory based. So where does it come from? Where does this creativity come from? Not a clue. Not the faintest clue. Because it is not simple laws of cause and effect. That's physics. Cause and effect is physics. But that cause and effect in a straightforward way, which is bound by a law, which follows a law of nature, is not intelligent. It's not creative. It's a code. It's a memory. It's a machine. Any new thinking, any new writing, any new music, any new way of saying I love you, any new way of doing mathematics, any new way of playing cricket, which is creative, which is not something that happened before. If you think about it, it is supernatural. It doesn't follow the law of nature. It's not physics. It's metaphysics, beyond physics. Consciousness is beyond physics. And that is what the Upanishads was saying from day one. That you are spirit. Matter is secondary. Matter, in fact, is trivial compared to spirit. You are intelligence. You are metaphysics. So realize your power. Don't be bound by the laws of nature. Moksha means to be liberated from the deterministic laws of nature, from conditioning, from Pavlovian conditioning. Krishnamurti, one of the greatest philosophers and mystics, you can see his videos on YouTube. He said, my only aim is to set man unconditionally free. If you want to summarize the Gita, you would have to say, act, don't react. React means Pavlovian conditioning. Act, react, act, react. I mean, it's spontaneous, it's bound by a rule. Anger begets anger, violence begets violence, or, react. And Gita says, stop it, act. Be master of your actions. Be different. Be supernatural. It says, Krishna says, I'm Purush, I'm not Prakriti. Prakriti mere adheen hai. Prakriti is laws of nature, it's physics. I am metaphysics, I'm Purush, I'm spirit. Prakriti is Maya. I can change the laws and nature will change. But I am the determiner, I am intelligence, I am creativity. Now, the way we teach in India and where we teach in many parts of the world is as if we were bound. Machines, rote machines, action, input, output tables. But we have to get to beyond that. We have to be creative. We have to think for ourselves. We have to debate. We have to find new ways of collaboration, of creating, of thinking, of loving, of having fun. Then we are human. My last statement. The Egyptians, when they made the pyramids, there's also this great what is called the Sphinx. I'm sure you've seen photographs of the Sphinx, which has a lion's body and a man's head. There's great speculation. They said sometime it pointed towards Taurus, which is the lion constellation. And when they built it, that is, what was it trying to say? Remember why the pyramids were built? The Egyptians thought that by preserving, the king's bodies, which are mummies, which you can still see, by the way. I remember in British Museum seeing the mummy for the first time, and it was amazing. And they said by preserving the body, people would not die. And often along with the mummy, they would pack, things of value, which the king had, which he loved. So they thought they'll take him to the next world. And then they put it in pyramids so that, the dead would not be disturbed and they could take it to the outer world. And the Sphinx said, we are trapped in an animal body, which is a lion's body, but our head is still human. The Indians, when the Egyptians were making pyramids and trying to carry the body into the next world, the Indians said, burn the body. Come on, burn it. Don't even bury it, burn it. Because once the spirit is liberated, consciousness is liberated from the body, if any remnant remains, even if it's underground, the consciousness might get attached to the body. Let the spirit go. Bodies come and go. As Krishna says, like, clothes, bodies are like clothes, they come and go. You are Purush, you are metaphysics. You are eternal, you create it. You're not Prakriti. So, Prakriti ke three gun hai, Satvik, Tamsik, Rajsik. Tamsik is darkness, inertia, laziness, sleep, sloth. Rajsik, just a word aata, Raja, passion, king, ambition, agitation. Satvik is harmony, light. So Krishna tells Arjun, move from tamas to rajas, from rajas to sattva. But more than that, move beyond all that. Be Purush, don't be Prakriti. So I started at Shantiniketan. I come back to the same place. We've taken a bit of a detour. So I'll stop here and we'll pass over to Nidhi, and we can go on from there. I've done my 1.5 hours, which is
Yes,
what you probably.
yes, sir. You were actually very right on time. You started at 3 o'clock, you finished at 4:30. That's commendable, sir.
Nidhi,
Thank you.
Hindustan में ना, you know what is the term for death? बोलते हैं काल, और समय को क्या बोलते हैं? काल. बोलते हैं ना?
Yes, sir.
So time is death. Eternity is beyond time. So I want to be eternal, madam. I want to be free of all.
I've definitely heard time is money, sir, but this is a new.
आप तो FMS वाले हो गए. Okay, madam. All yours.
As of now, sir, I have been looking at the chat box and I haven't found any questions. I just have found very deep congratulations and appreciation messages for you, sir. And I don't think that anybody has any questions for you. All what you said in your 1.5 lectures, our lecture was, I believe, very clearly understood and apprehended by everybody, sir. So I have been posting again and again for any queries that somebody has that want that that they need to clarify from you.
Let me pose a question everybody wants to answer. If
Yes,
you want
sir.
to promote creativity, because after a lot of people who are listening are teachers, right?
Yes.
What practical strategies have you tried or would you suggest so that people, instead of becoming just memory machines, become creative individuals? Anybody has any thoughts on that? Anybody would like to share? How do you make people creative? How do you encourage creativity?
Actually,
Anybody?
sir, the participants have joined via the YouTube live, so they won't be able
All
to
right.
answer your question as such. But I
All
will,
right. Okay.
I will take this question as an assignment and give this to them, and I will share their answers with you, sir. Because
All right.
in our workshop we have a concept like after the session gets over, we conduct
Right.
a quiz as well as we give an assignment for the participants to get evaluated upon. So I'll recommend, sir. I'll request if you can, share your question with me. I'll post it on the portal,
Sure,
and
sure,
definitely I will share their answers with you, sir.
sure. All right, thank you. My simple question is, if you want to promote creativity, which is the major aim of the NEP, what does one do? Because in India, we've been used to from early on to do exams and do rote learning and then regurgitate what we've learned in the classroom. And if you're going to do a paradigm shift from that to thinking and application and doing our own thinking, how do you do that? So that's a question that you can pose there.
Sure, sir. Sure. Thank you so much, sir. And some participant has posted by the name of Mr. Gautam Kharat. It's a really phenomenal, informative, enlightening, insightful, thought-provoking, excellent, and wonderful presentation. So he has used all the adjectives for your presentation, sir. And I mean, it's a really wonderful, session. And we at Teaching Learning Center, Ramanujan College, are really honored to have you with us to deliver such a fabulous and an insightful session, sir. Thank you so much for your valuable time. And in the future also, we would like you to be with us and keep on guiding us with the many other themes and topics that we propose to choose.
So thank you, Nidhi, and thank you, Professor Agarwal, for having me. Thank you also to all who've been patiently listening. And now let's all go and have coffee.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. And bye-bye. Take care.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.